Good morning, everyone. It's called Raised and Ready, and I'm taking a passage from Exodus 17, verses 8 to 16. There is an Old Testament story that tells us about the battle between Joshua and the Amalek army. The Amalekites had come up against the Israelites in Rephidim, which translated means resting place. Exodus 17 tells us that Israel's carer, Moses, said to Joshua, "Choose some of our men and go and fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." As Joshua fought the Amalekites in the valley of Rephidim, Aaron and Hur went to the top of the hill with Moses. Now notice, Moses was not alone. Aaron and Hur were there to support him. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites would prevail. Whenever Moses lowered his hands, the Amalekites prevailed. Have you ever been in that place of needing some support? We heard last week from some of our brothers and sisters when they cried out for help from God. Then they went into action by doing what they could and trusting God that he was there with them. When Moses' hands were tired, Aaron and Hur took the stone and put it under Moses, and he sat. And then Aaron and Hur held up Moses' hands so that Israel would prevail. They were watching and they were prepared. Can you see anywhere you may be able to help or support someone on their journey? It's interesting how this story paints the picture of the struggles and needs of the carer. Although the story is given to us to show how God intercedes on our behalf, even when we don't see his presence, it can have other interpretations that provide us comfort in the midst of our battles, even though the players might take on different incarnations, meaning that God became flesh, that God assumed a human nature, became a man in the form of Jesus Christ, the Son of God and the second person in the Trinity. The strength of the images can provide comfort to a troubled soul, just like Aaron and Hur as they helped Moses. Joshua represented the person who needs some help, or anyone who needs support in any way. He is the real warrior, the one who fights the battle and faces an ever-present danger of succumbing to the wounds inflicted by the enemy. Moses represents the carer, the one charged with responsibility to maintain a posture that produces victory and weariness at the same time. The one who must watch the battle rage and yet rise above it to do what needs to be done. Have you ever been in that position? Are you in that position now? The staff of God represents the weight of the world, pressing down on the arms of the carer. As gravity pulls harder, every passing minute forces the strength from the carer to weaken as the battle rages on. I think we all know a bit about how that feels, and how we like to bury our heads in the sand and hope it's all gone away when we come out of it. But life just isn't like that. Aaron and Hur represent those who walk in relationship with the carer, who rejoices when the carer rejoices and weeps when the carer weeps. They recognise the needs of the carer and provide the support without being asked. Have you ever been there weeping with someone, and as things began to change, you were rejoicing with them also? Hard work, but worth all the rejoicing and every tear that was shed along the way. Although Joshua fought the physical battle, Moses had to fight the intellectual, emotional, and spiritual one. Moses stood on the top of the hill while Joshua fought against the Amalekites. And although Moses was not in the battle, without him holding up the staff of God, Joshua just did not stand a chance against the Amalekites. As it was with Moses and Joshua, so it is with a person with any kinds of needs. Without the carer, the person who needs help does not stand a chance. The carer is standing on the top of a hill, watching the battle rage on from the intellectual, emotional, and spiritual point of view, struggles to bear the weight of the world and the responsibilities. I remember a particular time in our family, we were having a few problems with our boys, of which one was out of our care and control. And so we went to the appropriate authorities and asked for some help. But unfortunately, we didn't receive any help that was of any use. And at that particular time, we were fairly new Christians, and we didn't really know what to do. And as the parents, the carers of our sons, we were really on our own, not really knowing how best to move forward in this intellectual, very emotional, and very definitely spiritual situation, except for God, who walked with us. Even though we were not able to see him working, he was. Maybe not as quickly as we would have liked, but he was working. Our staff was prayer and some friends that were Christians. Just as Moses probably wanted Joshua to quickly prevail because it would mean relief from the stress of lifting the staff of God and the carer searches for a solution to the suffering of the person, because it will ultimately mean relief for the carer. Have you ever been there where you had to hold on to something and help someone move from one position to another, and the weight of maybe that person or the responsibility has caused you to be, oh my goodness, I can't do this any longer. I've got no energy. You fire up a prayer and you say, Lord, help me to have the strength to be able to do this. And you carry on. Because the Lord has helped you with that strength and that courage that you need. But standing on the top of the hill does not make the carer immune from the effects of the battle. Although Joshua was fighting with the sword, Moses was holding the staff of God up like this all the time, and Joshua's success hinged on Moses' strength to keep his hands lifted up. Well, we know ourselves that if we've raised our hands to lift something up, after a time our arms feel like lead weights, and you feel, oh my goodness, I cannot hold this any longer, how am I going to do it? And I need to hold it up. We must have all been there in some situation, not necessarily with our arms, but in a stressful situation that has caused weariness and lack of strength. In addition to fighting the intellectual, emotional and spiritual battles that rage on within, the carer is also performing the physical tasks that causes them to become weary, just like when it's a mentally and a physically strenuous thing to do, to actually stand alongside somebody and uphold them in their emotional stress and their emotional time. But it can be very rewarding. Are you at that place that you need to ask for help so that you can rest? Sometimes we don't know how to ask for help. We don't want to ask for the help. We don't know how to accept the help, as you're so used to coping on your own. But how you would love to rest. The story tells us that Moses' hands grew tired. Have you ever grown tired of the situation that you're helping support? Or you need the support? As long as Moses was able to hold his hands up, Joshua prevailed. As soon as his hands grew weary and dropped, the Amalekites prevailed. It's like that with us when our minds and bodies get tired and weary. We have nothing else to give. What happens then? You see, the person with needs can overcome physical battles so long as the carer has the strength to lift up the staff of God, or lift that person up, to bear up under the weight of the situation. But when the carer can no longer bear that stress of the situation, he or she weakens and the arms of the situation begin to fall, and the person who needs the help begins to lose their battle. What do you do then? Are you in this place now, this situation now? When Moses' strength began to fail, Aaron and Hur provided the necessary support. But so often, a carer is charged to lift his or her arms or the situation without any kind of support. And when the carer loses strength, the situation goes out of control. While Joshua fought, Moses, Aaron and Hur went to the top of the hill. Aaron and Hur were with Moses from the beginning, and when Moses struggled to keep up his arms, Aaron and Hur provided the support he needed. Can we offer to do this for someone we know who needs some help? I must say that any kind of help from anyone would have been most welcome at the time we were struggling with our family situation. Aaron and Hur did not receive the word that Moses was struggling, then leave the camp of Israel to go and help. They were with him from the beginning. That when they saw him begin to struggle, they went into action. They provided Moses with a place to sit, and they held up his arms. The story tells us they found a rock and placed it under him so he could sit. This requires physical effort on the part of Aaron and Hur. First, they had to find a rock. Then they had to bring it to Moses for him to be able to sit and rest. They didn't take Moses to the rock. They brought the rock to Moses. Can you imagine that? They had to source something for him to sit on. They took in the whole situation and were alert, ready to move when they needed to, and placed it under him, supporting his arms, keeping the staff of God uplifted. Moses did not say to Aaron and Hur, "Come up here, I need your help, I'm struggling." They went to him and they saw him struggling. They provided the help necessary without being asked. Can we do this for anyone? Do you know someone who needs support? And how alert are we to situations? Unfortunately, this is not reality for most carers of a person who needs the support and help. As the battle increases with intensity, the carer's world grows smaller and life moves at a slower pace. Because of the constant physical, intellectual, emotional and spiritual friction created by wanting to experience life, but instead they are responsible to manage the life and give care that is needed. A carer who lacks the structural support of a family and friends experience a world that has become a sort of prison from where there is no escape. Nowhere to turn. Ever been there? Unfortunately, it's a resounding yes for us. And so many others, as they go unnoticed by this busy world. Yet while the world of the carer is getting smaller and less active, the world around the carer gets larger and spins at an ever-increasing rate, and often in a very different direction. As the battle rages on, the carer grows weary, and without the support necessary to bear the weight of the world in which he or she exists, the carer tires and the enemy begins to prevail. For as the carer wearies and the person who needs help is left to fight the battle on his or her own, so often those with good intentions and are focused on the one fighting the battle, which is Joshua or you in your situation, and fail to look at the top of the hill. They fail to see the carer lifting up his arms with the weight of the world pressing down. Who was there when the carer, you, climbed your hill of the battle, of your battle? No one was there when the battle began. No one was there when the carer first raised his or her hands to ensure that the person they needed to help to prevail. And oftentimes no one is there to recognise the need of the carer and to provide the rock on which to sit and the strength by which to support his or her arms. You might think, I've never done anything like this before. What am I supposed to do? We need to be able to read the situation and the circumstances of people around us to pick up on the help that they might need and offer to come over and have a chat and a cup of tea, or just to sit with them for a little while, and as your conversation goes on, then you ask and say, is there anything we can do to help with what you're going through? But not to take on their responsibility, but to work with them in their responsibility. But when you ask that question, make sure that you are ready for the answer. Be prepared to be there and work with them. Not for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, half an hour. Be there and be ready to spend time with them. I remember there was a time when I was really rushing around like a lunatic, and I was trying to catch the bus and it was coming at a certain time, and I would just grab my keys and my coat and got my hand on the door to open the front door, and a knock came, and I thought, oh my goodness, who's this? Please, Lord, I need some help here, I need to get out. And I thought, okay, so I opened the door and it was a friend, and she was in a bit of a state. My heart sank with, I need to get out. But I decided there and then, if that was me, I would hate for somebody to say to me, I'm sorry, I haven't got time now. You need to be able to stay with that person. And with doing that, I invited her in. We had a coffee, we had a chat, we sorted things out, we had a prayer time. And because I was prepared to be part of that situation and the circumstances that she was working through, the Lord really blessed us in that time. And when we'd finished and we'd prayed and we had a cuddle and we spoke to each other, she went off quite happy. And it was so nice because that weight had been lifted from it. It wasn't anything to do with me. It was the Lord. The Lord took that burden from her because she'd shared it. And we were ready to sit down and spend that time with that person. Sometimes it's very costly. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm saying, are we ready to spend that time with that person when we ask that question? It's very important. Aaron and Hur were not there for a few minutes, but for the duration of the battle. As long as the battle raged on, Aaron and Hur remained by Moses' side and provided what was necessary so that Joshua would prevail. Here's an interesting little tidbit. Be careful how I say that. If Joshua won, Israel won. If Israel won, those who were with Moses, though they did not fight, still received spoils of the victory. So what does that say for those who stand with and support those who are carers of a person who really needs their help? I think we ought to have a real think about that one. So when you offer help and stay till the end, there is also a reward. The reward of knowing. It's knowing you've helped them through with God's guidance. Can we not trust God? What God's saying is, look, I can take care of the Amalekites. Just walk with me. Don't worry about them. You know the point of the staff Moses raised to heaven. A lot of people make it a sermon about prayer, and it is really. We don't know if Moses was praying. He'd got his hands up there, and he was with Aaron and Hur. I imagine they did pray. But the point about the staff is the power of God. That didn't sound right. In Exodus 17 and verse 16, it says, "A hand upon the throne of God, of the Lord. When I raised the staff heavenward, it was as if I laid hold of the throne room of heaven, and Yahweh himself came down to fight for us." That is the power of prayer, to reach into heaven and heaven to reach down to us with divine power. Wow. Think of the staff. It's God's power. Think of how it had been used. Moses threw it to the ground and it became a snake and ate up all of Pharaoh's snakes. It touched the river Nile. It became blood and then made it clean again. It hit the rock and water came gushing out. This staff is a picture of God's power. That single rod was of more avail than as if they had gone into the battlefield preceded by 1,000 banners. If Joshua had said, "We're not trained soldiers, we don't know how to fight, we don't even have 1,000 regiments," Moses could have said, "We have the staff," which is to say, we have the Lord. You and I are going to have more battles, more enemies, and more hard days. Hopefully, we will have some days in Elim with the palm trees and the springs, and God will give us some manna from heaven when we need it. But you are going to have Rephin, a place to rest, and Mara, some bitter times or hard times. Every one of those wilderness stops is in some sense is the same lesson. God is saying, you can trust me. You don't know what you're going to eat. God is saying, you can trust me. You're thirsty. You can trust me. You have enemies. You can trust me. Moses said, there's too many people here. You can trust me, Moses. We need to appoint other people to help others. Sometimes the hardest lesson is not that God can take care of our enemies, but that he can take care of his own people, you and me. He can conquer his enemies. That's in chapter 17. He can convert his enemies. That's in chapter 18. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, was saying, Yahweh is dynamite. This Midianite priest came over to Israel's side. Imagine that. How do we demonstrate that we truly believe the Lord is necessary for the victory and that he is able to give it to us? Well, we do the same thing as Moses did. We lift our hands to heaven. But I don't have a staff. You've got better than that. You have Jesus Christ at the right hand of God, interceding for you. You don't need a stick. You've got a saviour. Lift your hands to heaven and pray. Whether Moses was praying or not, it is absolutely a story about prayer. Not sure, but have you ever heard it said that the engine room of any church or situation is the engine room of prayer, which is power, God's power. Yeah. And that's how we lay hold of the throne room of heaven and gain access to his divine power. When we don't pray, you say, I can't do it, and God can't do it. But when you pray, you testify, I can't do it, and I'm not able, but he is. How do I testify? A few of our brothers and sisters gave their testimonies of how God walked beside them and guided them through their battles, bringing each one out the other side safe. Maybe a bit battered and bruised, but having the knowledge that God is their help and he is a strong tower to run into. You pray and gather around the cross. The cross is our banner. He is our security. Yahweh Nissi of the cross, the Lord on the cross, is our banner. Isn't that what Jesus said? The Son of Man shall be lifted up. How often do you and I lift up the Son of Man? The cross is your standard, raised high. We rally to its side and we regroup at it. We gather around it in the midst of the battle. We look to the cross. There we find courage for the fight and the rest that we need when we just cannot lift our arms any longer. Even the Son of Man grew faint and tired and could no longer hold up his arms. And on the third day, God gave him victory. Hallelujah. The final picture painted by this story is a profound truth of God. It introduces the intercession of Jesus Christ for those engaged in battle. What a person will need in their own personal battle, one that even the carer cannot fully understand. As the carer stands on the top of the hill and lifts his or her hands up to bear the weight of the world, of caring for the person who needs their help, God is giving the warrior the strength to stand strong and fight with courage beyond comprehension. In the end, the message of this story is clear. Every Joshua needs a Moses, and every Moses needs an Aaron and a Hur. Thank you.